America's national parks. You think wilderness, but there's more than meets the eye.
Firing!
Join us as we explore the amazing activity behind the scenes. As the National Park Service preserves and protects in ways you'd never expect. Slogging through the Everglades. Riding a wall of snow where drop-offs can be deadly. Risking it all to fight fire with fire. It's just another day on the job in the world of extreme maintenance. The Black Hills of South Dakota. The four faces of Rushmore jut out of a sheer cliff wall. A closer look reveals something out of the ordinary. A man dangles 100 feet above the ground. All part of an ongoing effort to preserve this shrine to democracy. George Washington represents our birth as a nation. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence that fueled the flame of freedom. Abraham Lincoln preserved our unity. And Theodore Roosevelt symbolizes our development as a nation. The sculptor Gutzon Borglum chose Mount Rushmore for its sunlit location and durability. The mountain is made of rock-solid granite. There were no stonemasons in the middle of South Dakota. Locals had to be trained for the job. These ordinary people who crafted with dynamite and trusted their lives to steel cable for 14 years are the unsung heroes of Rushmore.
The vertical lines in the rock you can see are the result of their jackhammers. They would carve deep holes in the rock for the powdermen to place dynamite. And they got so skilled at dynamite that they could blast within inches of the final surface of the faces.
The sculptor knew his masterpiece would be tested by time. He even devised a substance to caulk the cracks before the scaffolding was removed in 1941. Granite erodes at a rate of 1 inch every 10,000 years, but the enemy comes from within. In the form of freezing water. Moisture seeps into the cracks, expands when it freezes to escalate erosion.
In the 1980s, there was an effort undertaken to find a more suitable material to fill the fractures. What they came up with is a silicone-based sealant. What they also decided to do was to just caulk the fractures on the top of the sculpture, the top and on the vertical surfaces. That way, if there was water that did get into the fractures, it had a way to drain out.
At Rushmore, maintenance isn't skin deep. Respec, a geological engineering firm, identified 144 fractures and fed them into a computer model. Like pieces of a 3D puzzle, scientific analysis determined 22 individual rock blocks. To detect any signs of widening between the blocks, the mountain is wired with nearly 2 miles of cable.
So we monitor those fractures on the sculpture, and we monitor movement of those blocks, relative movement.
Each year, these aging politicians get some TLC. Crews climb a hidden trail that begins at the base of the mountain. Not your ordinary employees. Once they make a 500-foot trek to the top, their mission is to rappel down one of the man-made marvels of the world. Though technology has changed, there's no escalator here. Everyone follows the footsteps of the original workers to the summit. Bob Chrisman has spent 30 years watching over Rushmore.
Okay, let's go down.
What may seem like a tall order takes on new meaning when a steel cable is all that separates him from a fall. He heads down in a bosun chair, a relic left over from the original construction. Close to the edge, 2 NPS winch operators hold his life in their hands.
But we're still a couple hundred feet above the first bounce, is like I like to call it.
A whistle signals a move up or down. The inspection begins eye to eye with Thomas Jefferson. In spite of the danger factor, Rushmore has a perfect track record. There has never been a fatality, and the National Park Service aims to keep it that way. While the faces get their annual exam, the respec engineering team checks 36 gauges mounted in the surface of the stone.
Hey, are you at an instrument ready to go?
I'm at I3.
To test the system, a gauge is displaced. Movement is detected. The data is confirmed. With measurements taken every 4 hours, 365 days a year, over 700,000 data points suggest the rock is stable for now.
The existing joints are in good shape. There's nothing that's admitting any large amounts of damaging water. There's a lot of lichen growth.
Lichen casts a greenish hue as the growth produces an acid that deteriorates rock over thousands of years. Someday, Rushmore may need a pressure wash to ensure it lasts as long as the country. Back on the ground, a steady stream of visitors make their way along the Avenue of Flags, unaware of the challenges of maintaining Mount Rushmore. And that's how it should be.
I think the first thought as they walk up the Avenue of Flag is that just the size of it and the immensity of the heads up there. But then I think it slowly evolves into a real feeling of patriotism and a real feeling that these were our founding fathers and this is a special place.
And the National Park Service will do whatever it takes to ensure it's a place where people can return generation after generation. National Park's extreme maintenance travels to earthquake country, where both sides of the Golden Gate Bridge sit on National Park land. Located between the San Andreas and the Hayward Faults, it's also a land with a seismic past. In 1989, the 7.1 magnitude quake at Loma Prieta shook things up from an epicenter 50 miles to the south. A study by the U.S. Geological Survey predicts a 70% probability a major quake will strike the Bay Area by the year 2030. The Golden Gate Bridge was untouched this time. With a span of 1.7 miles and a height of 746 feet above the Golden Gate Strait, earthquake proofing is now a priority. A $400 million seismic retrofit began in 1997.
A retrofit is a fancy way of saying that we're strengthening and retuning the bridge to be able to withstand what is known in the earthquake industry as a maximum credible earthquake of about 8.2, 8.3. It's a complex project because we're working in a national park. So we're working with the Golden Gate National Recreation Area to assure that the park visitors still have access to the park, but at the same time we're running a major construction project.
A project that works around the continuous flow of 40 million annual motorists. Motorists mostly unaware of the world that lies below. While these views may be platinum, they come with a price. conditions can be brutal. Winds gust up to 70 miles an hour. Fog rolls in to make visibility tough. Heights are tremendous. To add to the challenge, the Golden Gate retrofit takes place 320 feet over another historic landmark, Fort Point. It's the only Civil War fort on the West Coast. The original designers of the bridge wanted to level it, but the fort was saved from the wrecking ball by building an arch.
So here we are today, 66 years later, having to retrofit that arch, but we've had to accommodate the visitors to the Fort Point structure.
The fort shuts down several days a week for the construction.
When they're working above us, or what happens is they drop things and it falls down into the courtyard, so it's just too dangerous for us to be open.
Roped in by harnesses, crews working day and night move across staging areas.
And many things are fabricated right to the final detail in place. That's one thing that when you're working with a structure that was built in the 1930s and you're working with the original plans, you get out in the field and things are a little different. And so sometimes things have to be monkey-rigged a bit to fit.
Rebuilding an internationally recognized landmark from the inside out requires attention to detail. From the Art Deco design, to the cross-bracing, to its distinct shade of reddish orange, Eva Bauer is the project manager on what she describes as the project of a lifetime.
At the time that the bridge was constructed, until 1960s, this was the longest suspension bridge in the world. So what engineers and architects accomplished with construction of this bridge it was really unprecedented. They were in uncharted waters and they accomplished to build this marvel. This project involves very complex concrete work and very complex steel work. And we're adding elements that emulate the look of the original elements, but structurally they are very different.
Handling heavy pieces of steel hundreds of feet above the bay is intense.
Well, you gotta watch out for all kinds of things. If you're climbing, you gotta wear a safety harness and you gotta watch out for falling. And if you're working underneath somebody, you gotta watch out for things dropping on you.
When it's all said and done, it will take a staggering 27.6 million pounds of steel and 24,000 cubic yards of concrete to strengthen the bridge.
It is the difficulty of the job, and this is so much different from the construction of the new bridge, where you have a freedom to design your form and design the structure to your liking, really. We don't have this freedom. We have to be much smarter to make sure that this is a modern structure with the look of the original bridge.
And this modern structure will be state-of-the-art with the highest possible seismic standards. .8 miles across the bay, another American icon is finishing its retrofit to ensure the next San Francisco shakedown doesn't take it down. Of the areas under the care of the National Park Service, many are set aside because they offer a window into our history. While Alcatraz may seem an unlikely candidate, people can't get enough of the rock. Today, this defunct prison is a major visitor attraction. Cost was key to closing it in 1963. It was thought to be cheaper to keep a prisoner at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel with room service than to keep one on Alcatraz.
There's no hookup to the mainland power source. There's no sewage on Alcatraz. There's no water on Alcatraz. Everything has to be brought out to the island and shipped back. And the challenge of that is it costs over $5,000 per barge run. We have to bring everything out to the island, then our maintenance people can work on it.
For the retrofit, high-tech computer modeling software shook the building to determine how it would react in the event of a major earthquake. Once weak areas were identified, Alcatraz had to be anchored to the very rock it sits on.
Alcatraz is a fascinating building from an engineering perspective because it's really a huge box with other buildings inside it, those other buildings being the cell blocks. And the real challenge of an engineering project like this is trying to think about how that works in an earthquake. And in this building, our first concern was really how the columns are attached to the cell blocks. So we took care of that, brought all the forces down within the cell blocks, and really hid everything behind the walls as much as we could. So to the average visitor, all you would see is something like, wow, the concrete here is a different color. And it doesn't really matter that much to them, or they wouldn't notice it, but it's really all bolted down to the rock.
To complicate safety matters, this was a prison designed so you couldn't get out. There was a front door and a back door, and that was it. Since earthquakes come with no warning, and there are only 2 exits, the goal of the retrofit is not to save the building, but to make sure it stands long enough for thousands of visitors to be safely evacuated. One of the major areas in need of attention was the utility corridor, the site of the only successful escape from Alcatraz. In the year 1962, 3 inmates made history.
The spoon proves mightier than the bars that supposedly escape-proofed Alcatraz prison. 3 bank robbers serving long terms scratched their way through grills covering an air vent, climbed a drainage pipe, and disappeared from the forbidding rock in San Francisco Bay. It appears to be the first successful escape in the history of the maximum security prison. They painstakingly fashioned dummies of plaster with hair of paintbrush bristles to stand in for them during cell check, while they covered an escape hole with a cardboard grill.
A reward of $50 per man never led to a single clue. Although their bodies were never found, it's unlikely they survived the currents of the bay. Yet, the escape from Alcatraz captured the imagination of the American public.
They came out of these openings. These openings used to be much smaller. They were 6 by 9 inches. We wanted to work around this. We didn't want to cover it up. We didn't want to have a collector beam running right through it, so that everybody would be able to visualize sitting in a cell, being so desperate that you needed to squeeze your way out and try to make an escape, even if it meant losing your life.
Beyond earthquake proofing, park officials would argue the daily grind of maintaining the rock is daunting. And you may be surprised to learn that on Alcatraz, birds of a feather flock together, creating an enormous mess.
Alcatraz in Spanish means strange-looking bird or pelican. That's what the Spanish named the island, and the birds have come back today. On an average summer day on Alcatraz, we have 5,000 visitors on the island and 10,000 birds back on Alcatraz. And they have to be dealt with in the sense of all the bird droppings hitting the historic structures, the feathers, the bird nests, jam up the drains and the gutters on the island. And the maintenance we have to do starts at 5 in the morning, and we have to come out and pressure wash a lot of the areas to keep it clean for the visitors. We come out on the barge runs, we bring out extra supplies to do that, we bring out fresh water to do that.
For now, the rock is stable, and the National Park Service can concentrate on the monthly barge runs that keep Alcatraz running smoothly. National parks deal with the force of fire. A force so powerful that an interagency fire center dispatches crews and technology from all over the country at a moment's notice. The majority of the fires are ignited when lightning strikes. Yet each year, the National Park Service deliberately burns forest fuels in a massive effort to restore the ecosystem. At the crack of dawn in late August, 100 firefighters converge at an incident command post along the north rim of the Grand Canyon. Today, there's no emergency, and that's the way they want to keep it. The mission? To execute a prescribed burn, a complex maneuver designed to reduce the buildup of hazardous undergrowth that could easily fuel a fire.
It is a healthy process for that ecosystem and that forested structure. It's a good thing.
Surrounded by hundreds of miles of forest, any large-scale, high-intensity wildfire at the Grand Canyon could be a threat to visitors, the landmarks, and the forest itself. Prepping the line means moving fuel in the form of dead wood away from the boundaries.
Has everybody got a chance to look at the objectives for the plan? You'll notice this morning that we've incorporated the outlet fire in here as well. So we'll just kind of run through them very quickly.
Operations briefings keep the burn plan top of mind. Despite thorough planning, as the crew heads out, it's hard to predict exactly how the day will go. And there's no margin for error. A test determines if the fire will behave the way fire managers expect.
Test fire lets us see exactly what the fire is going to do. Right? And it's everything up until this point has been done by computer models for fire behavior and the fuel loading information that we have on this unit. And until we actually get here and put fire on the ground, we're not absolutely positive what the fire is going to do.
Responsibility for success or failure falls on the shoulders of the burn boss. With human lives at stake, conditions must be perfect, or field managers will cancel the burn.
Prescription parameters in the plan favorable for implementing the project?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Finally, the work begins. Crews crisscross the area with drip torches. Called blacklining, the objective is to create a buffer zone.
And what we do is just run along a hand line or a road or a natural barrier to create a defensible space for whatever else we're going to do in the interior of the burn.
The fire burns at varying intensities as the canyon's inferno begins to take off.
What we have here is a snag, what we call a snag, which is a dead tree. They're a lot more prone to catch fire, obviously, because they don't have the fuel moisture. And this one's leaning out over the line, and we're trying to keep fire from crossing over to this side of the line. So I'm just trying to keep fire from getting up into it, because if it gets into the tree, it's going to be a mess.
Ignition's and holding. Did you copy the weather?
Go ahead, Dub.
Yeah, it's stuff that you guys got
We
going
do
on.
radio checks with folks as soon as they're out in the field. We'll communicate and relay weather to make sure that everybody's copying any change in conditions and weather. So there's a whole lot that goes into communication. And if you're not a good communicator, you'll fail miserably.
And this is essentially a couple thermometers, one of which I will get wet. That's called the wet bulb, and the dry bulb. And I'll spin this in the shade, get a couple of numbers, and look on my charts here, which are elevationally specific. Get a couple of numbers, and from that I'll get the relative humidity and the dew point. When we're out here, the things we're paying attention to are the temperature, the winds, and the relative humidity. And those are the three big things. And if we go out of prescription on any one of those criteria, we've got to stop what we're doing, hold the situation, hold the fire, keep it within its lines. And then when we come back into prescription, we'll continue what we're doing.
Blacklining established the fire's perimeter. The next phase moves it deeper into the woods.
To do that, we have to achieve mortality or kill some of the smaller trees because they're competing with the larger trees for the limited water supply. And it's a real balancing act to get mortality on that mid-story and not kill the older stories. It's a hard thing to do.
Firing!
A pistol nicknamed a grenade gun shoots off a flaming trail.
We're aiming to get high enough and to get far enough to where it's going to create another ignition point.
Firing!
Since heat draws heat, multiple interior ignition points will pull the fire into the forest. The next phase takes it to the air, the safest and most efficient way to burn a large area. The actual mode of ignition comes from a surprising source: ordinary ping-pong balls. A specially designed machine injects the balls with a chemical. When dropped, there's a 20 to 30 second delay before they self-ignite.
This is all the balls we're going to take in the ship. This is a total of 12,000 balls. There's 6 in each container. We take this many balls due to the large size of the area. We want to be able to do almost the whole ignition in one shot. Then this is the hopper, which we fill this full of balls. Then they feed down through here, and this is actually what controls the dispensing of the balls.
As the chopper stands by, senior fire officials concur on the conditions. Once in the air, everything is reevaluated. Although visitors have been forewarned, as smoke seeps in to cloud the views of the Grand Canyon, a fire information officer explains the situation.
But with the heat of the day, the smoke has been rising and getting back up in the atmosphere and dispersing nicely.
We get a lot of visitors here, and they're mostly scenic visitors, and smoke disturbs that scenery, and a lot of people aren't real happy about that. We do go to great lengths to try and manage the smoke, and that drives a lot of our prescriptions here.
Once you light a fire, you're in for the long haul. Teams patrol the fire lines 24/7.
The bone pile behind me is way to reduce more fuel loading on the ground, and also from the trees that we have cut, and we've prepped this line prior to being burned. And we're trying to get rid of the cut marks on the logs and stuff like that for visitors to the canyon to see more natural environment.
Although it may look like the fire has died down, it's not over.
You look at taking a dead tree and they don't fall the way that they're supposed to, and you've got branches that fall out of the top, we call them widow makers, and from that to just when you least expect it, fire will do the strangest things.
Always a risky business, the firefighters walk the fine line between restoring the ecosystem and keeping the Grand Canyon safe for visitors.
It's dangerous. It's really dangerous. There's days where you wonder why in the heck you're doing it.
I've worked at a lot of places and made more money than I've made working here. And I do this because I can make a difference in the environment and hopefully change the way things are managed and conditions of our forests.
You get done at the end of the season and you're worn out, your knees hurt, and your back hurts, and it only takes about 2 weeks before you want to go out and do it again.
And for this group of fire professionals dedicated to the National Park Service, seeing a burn come together and stay within the prescription is the ultimate reward. Deep inside northern Montana's Glacier National Park, avalanches strike with awesome force. Over 33 mapped avalanche chutes cut right across the Going to the Sun Road. A road built into the face of a mountain that climbs 2,500 feet over the Continental Divide. Snow that begins piling up in September can reach heights of 80 feet and keep parts of the road permanently closed. In an annual rite of spring, Lou Summerfield leads the road operations crew in one of the world's most dangerous jobs, to clear the Going to the Sun road.
What, did I hear the four-letter word snow?
Oh yeah, it's white.
It's sticky?
It's slush right now, but it feels like the temperature dropping to me up there.
Snowstorms often halt or undo the work, raising the risks as the park crews plow their way through nearly 50 miles of alpine road.
I love this mountain and this road, but I have an awful lot of respect for it. And I think it's when you let your guard down, you may get into a situation that's uncomfortable.
Equipped with a fleet of extreme machines, crews rise to the harrowing task of carving a road between the rock and a sheer cliff drop-off. A lone bulldozer makes the first cut.
You're making a little goat trail basically on top of the snow. It's just kind of, you know, you look down, it's straight down on one side, and you look up, it's straight up on the other.
It's just a dozer, but what you have to do with it makes it hazardous duty. Supervisors say you shouldn't be here if you're not scared.
There's some places on this road, if you go off, it's unlikely you're going to survive.
The dozer makes way for front-end loaders and super snowblowers that can clear 4,000 tons of snow in an hour. Sometimes all operators see is white. They have to go on instinct. As they move higher, the danger escalates. This is avalanche country. A slide can knock man and machine right off the mountain.
And they need all the concentration they can get. They need to focus on their task, and they don't need to be worrying about things like avalanches, and that's where our job comes in.
Avalanche watchers Blaze Reardon and Chris Lundy give the daily go-ahead to plow or not. A snow pit lets them test the snowpack to see if a denser or heavier layer overlaps a weaker one.
The next layer is between 33 and 35.
Okay.
Snow crystals are analyzed for signs of weakness.
Chris, it looks like they're kind of in between.
Anything that can trigger a slide is noted. Working above the avalanche paths, these seasoned pros never forget the lives of the road workers are in their hands.
I watch them as they plow through some of the steeper sections, you know, running that equipment where there's big drop-offs and the road is icy or it's just soft snow they've piled up, and you know, I can hardly watch it sometimes. The avalanche path I think that concerns Chris and I the most is Triple Arches, which is right behind me in the sun. It's a really large bowl up above the road. It's capable of producing some very large slides, but even small slides in there, because it's so steep, can run down and hit the operators as they're moving snow off the road.
We've sat and talked about what date the road would open if we did no snow removal, because it is a huge effort to get it done. And there's 3 or 4 spots that would never open naturally.
After 2 straight months of 10-hour days, 7 days a week, it's a relief when the job is done. The goal is to open the road for Memorial Day, but the average opening date is not until June 8th. And in these parts, it symbolizes the arrival of summer.
721, Going to the Sun Road is officially open.
Once the road is cleared, repair work begins on sections that have crumbled under the weight of the winter snowpack. Visitors are warned to travel at their own risk.
We saw a sign. What was that?
Uncontrolled avalanche slopes exist above. Travel at your own risk. That was a nice sign.
Some guy got out and took a picture of it. But yeah, we were worried.
I've seen rocks up here on the road early in the season that were the size of Volkswagens.
I've been keeping an eye on the small rocks on the road, but we haven't been too worried about it. But it's just one more interesting aspect of this area.
Despite falling rock and dropping temperatures, traffic creeps along and comes to a halt for the locals. Although the road is officially open, and a place where it can snow in July, it's anyone's guess how long it will stay open. It's all part of the annual maintenance of Glacier National Park. National Park's extreme maintenance takes us to the Everglades. On the tip of southern Florida, a 100-mile river of grass is home to over 500 species of wildlife. That includes one charismatic carnivore.
When you think of the Everglades, you think of alligators. I mean, it's that simple. You know, when visitors come to the park, one of the things they come to see is the alligator.
Called the living dinosaur, the alligator is an ancient species. These top predators are extremely important. Now protected, their population is monitored in a long-term project that takes researchers to the air, circling vast marshes looking for nests.
You see it? Yes. Okay. Right there in this corner.
Yeah, it's under a little tree.
You kind of get a feel for it after a while where you think alligators are going to nest. You know, there are cues like you see alligator trails, you see the alligator themselves.
Sonny Bass and Mario Alvarado slog through chest-high grasses. This is definitely a job for two. One stands guard, while the other opens an alligator nest.
Females usually, you know, maybe 50-50. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. But they do protect the nest. It's not that she's trying to hurt us, she's trying to protect the nest. If we're there, once we get there, what we do is we open up the nest, lay all the eggs out in an order, and that's important too, without rotating these eggs, because you want to keep them just the way they are. We count all of them, and then we put them back in the nest. Needless to say, once that nest is open, it makes it incredibly vulnerable if that female charges the nest. And if she hits the nest, she doesn't know whether the nest's open or not. You know, the eggs will go flying.
To date, the study reveals the hatchling rate's on the rise. A good thing for the gators, the visitors who expect to see one, and the Everglades.
You know, a lot of people ask you the questions, well, what good's an alligator? What we've been trying to do through our work is understand the importance to these animals to maintaining this system and what those animals mean to the health of the system. And by that I mean, if you've got good, healthy alligator populations here, then you've got a good, healthy system.
In this one-of-a-kind ecosystem, alligators share space with their infamous cousins. The brackish areas where fresh and salt water meet are one of the last strongholds of the American crocodile.
When the crocodile was first listed as endangered, special areas of the park were defined as critical crocodile habitat. And so the Park Service took this information and closed them off to the public as a crocodile sanctuary.
To protect the crocodile, Everglades National Park teams up with the University of Florida for a study that monitors their whereabouts. During nesting season, wildlife biologists and croc docs Mike Cherkis and Mark Perry prowl the shoreline looking for signs of newborn crocs. Unlike alligators that build nests from vegetation, crocodiles lay their eggs in mud mounds.
Here we have a crocodile nest that hatched this year. This was a big, large mound at one point. This is probably where the egg cavity was originally, and she dug it out. This nest hatched about 2 weeks ago, and she would come and she'd dig out the eggs and then carry the hatchlings to safe waters.
Armed with mesh jackets and head nets, fighting off hundreds of hungry mosquitoes is an occupational hazard. While the insects are hard to miss, the American crocodile keeps a very low profile. They're difficult to spot in the daytime.
We use spotlights to locate the crocodiles at night because they have a layer of their eye that reflects the light back at you like deer do in the headlights, or cats or animals, or like you do when you have a red eye in a picture.
Shining the light through the undergrowth, they find nothing. Suddenly, a break. They see the hatchlings. Wading through knee-high water, the last thing anyone needs is a run-in with the mother. Mark carefully plucks the babies from the water.
Very nice with the light.
Back at the boat, they're measured, weighed, then examined for their condition.
He's pretty well developed. Doesn't have his yolk exposed anymore. Looks healthy and happy.
Scoots, or ridges cut into the cartilage, give the croc an ID number to track it over its lifetime.
I'm gonna cut one about here, one about here, a couple over here. When you cut the scoots, they really don't tend to pay much attention to it. If anything, they seem to be a little more sensitive to the scoots that are farther towards the end of the tail. Other than that, there's usually no reaction at all. If there is, it's just kind of a little twitch. It's definitely not something that's causing them pain.
If all goes well, these baby crocs may reach 10 feet and weigh several hundred pounds. The croc docks release the hatchlings back into the murky waters. Their statistics go into a croc catalog to track long-term survival.
Well, the American crocodile was down to only a few hundred animals at one point. Now they are really spreading out again. Most of their nesting and living habitat is protected within the park and the Crocodile Lake National Wildlife Refuge and Everglades National Park. So they've really made quite a recovery.
Like the alligator, the crocodile is a conservation success story. One day, it may move from endangered to threatened status. As the National Park Service continues its efforts to protect the Everglades. In Maryland, the National Park Service acts as caretaker for the Antietam National Battlefield, the site of the bloodiest single day in America's history. Here, extreme maintenance means maintaining an ambitious tradition. For the past 16 years, on the first Saturday of December, 1,300 volunteers gather to keep alive the memory of the 23,110 casualties recorded here on September 17, 1862.
And what you literally had was tens of thousands of men in a pretty close, compact space, men that can't see all that well. It had rained the night before, fairly foggy, the ground is very unlevel. As the battle pushed back and forth, there was artillery on all different sides, just showering in metal from different sides. Very unorganized kind of in the waves of attack, so you just ended up with an awful lot of men in one compact space.
The battle, named after Antietam Creek, was a victory for Union forces, but it came with an incredible cost. There were more American casualties in one day than in any battle before or after the Civil War, over twice as many as D-Day and Pearl Harbor combined.
Unbelievable, this sheer enormity of the loss here.
To honor these soldiers, 23,110 luminaries must be set out along the 6 miles of the battlefield and lit within 7 hours.
Our volunteers come from all walks of life. We have North groups, South groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. We have entry-level clerks working next to a CEO. It just really is a composite of people that just want to volunteer.
Every group is assigned a section of the field.
Each year we do the same area, and we come out and stretch our ropes out measure everything off, and place all the candles on a 15-foot square grid. We have 18 boys this year and 7 or 8 adults helping with the process. We're pretty daggone close, within an inch.
Each has its own method to mark off a spot for one luminary every 10 feet.
But it's the ingenuity of the volunteers who come out and do this is just amazes me, because it's a lot of candles spread over 6 miles. And to be able to hold that precision together all the way through is absolutely amazing.
Luminaries are set around the many monuments erected between 1890 and 1950 to honor state and individual fighting units. Pieces of stone made of flesh and blood. Confederate and Union living historians cross lines at the cornfield, the area where half of the day's casualties happened. By late afternoon, luminaries are set as far as the eye can see. But they still have to be lit. So how do you light fields full of over 23,000 candles in an hour? One by one. Called the Antietam candle, it was designed with a wick guaranteed to burn for 12 hours, the length of the battle. The event is held in December, when the weather reduces the fire hazard. Yet once the fields are lit, a change in wind is a major concern.
We will not hold the event if the winds are in excess of 15 to 20 miles an hour. Of course, we won't hold it if it's raining, but we have our wildland fire truck here along with 4 firefighters that are on duty then until about 6 o'clock in the next morning.
We're marching up to Zion. That beautiful. That beautiful.
At 4:45, as the sun begins to set, people gather to remember that each candle represents a life.
On that day in September, 23,110 men were killed or wounded. That's a big number, but it's just a number. And the only way people can understand what 23,110 is to see this, to see one candle representing one soul of one soldier. It really brings home the idea of the sacrifice. Whether we disagree or agree with what their beliefs were, they were Americans who died here in the only war where Americans fought Americans.
For the National Park Service, extreme maintenance means extreme care. We're the first country to set aside wild areas for protection and enjoyment. From conserving our amazing natural resources with a prescribed burn, clearing a high alpine road, to saving a species from extinction, national parks are keepers of our natural treasures and history. And in these special places, people can take a moment to reflect on what it means to be an American.